Hi everyone, welcome to another Wellbeing Conversation brought to you by the Busy Women Club and the Wellbeing Directory. And we've got today another of our members with us, Yvonne Devereaux, who is from Yvonne's Leadership Development. So we're going to talk all things coaching, mentoring and training, I think, today, aren't we, Yvonne?
Yeah,
So welcome, thank you for
thank
joining
you.
us. Um, Let's go back to the start of your career. Tell me about your journey from fashion to where you are now. How's that come about?
So I joined Wallace, well over 20 years ago now. Wallace were one of the members of the Arcadia brand, so Topshop, if you remember.
I remember it well.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Wallace was the kind of high-end ladies fashion element, and I was a management trainee with them. So I had a bit of customer service background before I joined them, but wow, Wallace was a brand, like proper, everything was attention to detail, in terms of the styling, the presentation, and the outstanding customer service bit. So that kind of quality and professionalism added
Yeah.
on to that great people leadership. It's now, I did it for so long, it's in my DNA now.
So did you go in on a sort of graduate scheme? Was
Yeah,
that how you? Because
yeah,
I did the same thing, but with a different company, who I won't name. Um, which I found a very interesting, structured experience as a young person going first out into
yeah.
work. You know, it was very, uh, not a lot of room for self-expression. You're very much within the boundaries, weren't you, of that graduate plan of being moved from tier to tier?
It was very structured. I was very lucky. I went in on a top 30 store with a really experienced manager. So really had a nice kind of, she now, I'll still think back, what would Debbie do? That kind of thing in your mind where you're looking up to that kind of role model element. That's still in me, and I was really lucky with that. But what it led to after the training, I started the mentoring quite quickly. So I was able to sort of
Okay.
look after and support L&D with the new round of trainees. So that kind of get me an in with L&D and the L&D manager. So then I got the training bit, like, I was like, okay, I'm going to poke into that now. Let me have a go at that bit. So I was kind of that target market when I'd gone into my management role for a lot of the stuff L&D were creating. So I could kind of be involved in the design, but then go test it out, like appraisals, sales advisor competencies, induction materials. So then I could kind of take that forward and get involved throughout my career. So I had an amazing blended career with L&D and retail. So getting those angles really helped me to understand the real world of it, as well as how you create it and then
Yeah, yeah.
implement. So that was fab for me. And then coaching came a lot later. So coaching came when more recently I was in an organisation where I was in L&D but not managing anyone. So I felt
Okay.
that I was like misconnect of, you get it to a degree with training, but that helping and growing people one on one that coaching
Yeah.
can really give
Yeah.
you. That's the transformational bit for me, and it's so rewarding. So when I decided to launch Yvonne's Leadership Development, I thought, actually, I'm a bit different to a normal coach because I've got that background of L&D and the training and the mentoring. So they were my three pillars that I kind of thought, I can coach, I can mentor, and I can train. And that gives me slightly varied audiences as well. Because naturally my niche would be leadership because it's my background. But because of the personal development angle that I've experienced from coaching, I think there's a lot to be said in that space for self leadership, and those people that want to grow and develop but necessarily don't want to be a leader. They just want to reach their potential, and that for me is a big thing in what I do as well, because it's not always about the upwards journey, is it?
No, no. So when you set up your leadership development business, were you still working for somebody else? Was this sort
Yes,
of, oh,
yes. So yeah, and I still am now. I'm in an employed role. I've reduced hours so I can do the two nicely. But yeah, it's a nice blend because I've got the holistic L&D angle and then my business. So they align really well, which is really nice. Yeah.
so how do you find your clients? Where do they come from?
Well, a mixture really. Mainly my clients are ones I've adopted through word of mouth, to be honest. I did a
Yeah,
lot,
yeah,
in the coaching space, you work a lot with peers, and then you learn with different people, and they're like, "Do you know what? My sister needs some coaching, blah, 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 blah," and then you
yeah,
go,
yeah, yeah.
"Oh, will you pass this on? Will you pass?" So that's grown me a really nice rounded audience. And now I'm kind of branding it a little bit wider, that um, it's sort of, it's okay to be who I am wherever I am, if that makes sense. So even
Yeah.
at work, I am, I am obviously representing the organisation, and I work with them very well. But people know what I do, so they can talk about that with me as well, and it kind of comes from different angles. A lot of the time, we have to do associate work as coaches and trainers. There is different ways that we kind of pick up different clients. So yeah, definitely work in that kind of, how do I find my people. For me, it's at the minute where I've been, it's been word of mouth, and connection is
Mm,
a thing.
And they're usually the best clients to get, aren't they?
Yeah, because
You're halfway there with referrals.
exactly, the marketing is hard work for sometimes little reward, and consistency. And what I've learned is people want to see you. They want you as a
Mm,
brand if you're
mm,
marketing. So that takes a lot of time and energy. So
yeah,
how much energy do I spend on that versus connecting with people and actually making those relationships to maybe live a little bit
yeah,
of authentic building on it? Yeah.
yeah. So tell me about your brand, this brand that you're creating. What really defines you?
Well, I think I feel like I am the brand, because my journey has shaped a lot of what I'm offering. And I think when you've kind of experienced it, and you can see it's working, and you want to shout about it and tell others about it. So that was sort of like that for me. Not to say that my journey is going to replicate everyone's journey that I work with, but
Yeah,
yeah, I definitely feel like a lot of the evidence of success from what I've experienced, I can then help with. So when I'm working with a client, it will be from the angle of curiosity, which is natural in the coaching world. But I don't need to have their experiences, or be an expert in their world, same as they don't need to be in mine. Because as coaches, we're never going to claim to know it all. We sit in those thoughts with people, we partner gently, and we'll consider those options and outcomes for them. And it's that silence space, that questioning, that's the value, that gives that session that clarity. So I like I like to think that I am the brand, because I'm creating that for that person, and I can see the success of what's happened, but I don't ever want to replicate that. It's got to be from their angle.
yeah,
So I want people to leave knowing that they're in the space, they're not alone, but they're going away with accountabilities for them to implement something, and to, because their success feels like it's part of
yeah,
my
yeah. Very personal.
life. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So your target audience, then, you said to me earlier, it's someone like you,
Yeah, it really.
um, who is sort of seeking self-improvement, um, perhaps confidence issues, self-esteem issues.
Yeah,
How does that relate back to you in your experience? Tell me a bit about you and your journey on this road, because I think whenever we step into practicing ourselves, we've walked that journey, haven't we? And
oh yeah.
we can bring so much to the table from our own experience.
And interestingly, when you were saying that, it made me think, goodness me, do you know what? If I'd have had this kind of world at certain points in my journey, it would have been really helpful.
Yeah,
The journey for me now, particularly the mindset I'm in now, is it's always evolving. So, there's been points in my career when I've thought, yeah, I'm really proud of that, but that's it. I'm done with that now. I'm going to leave that. The
mm,
door's closed.
mm.
I was redundant at 30. The day before I turned 30, I walked out of Hollis,
Wow.
um, and you know what? That was hard. But I think later now, I'm sort of 15 years down the line of that, nearly, that I think I now realise how hard that was. Whereas at the time, I just sort of lost my way with the succession planning, and where things were going to go. So it took a lot of work, a lot of coaching, to help me realise actually there's more to do. And I'm definitely back then at the start of the journey, I was always looking for that learning, but now it's definitely much more of a part of me. Um, I like to absorb and watch others, not to compare or kind of replicate, but to just inspire me or to learn to create my own offering. So that for me, where you were saying about that kind of continuous improvement bit, is something that I like to use as like a refinement to. So what does that mean for me? And that comes back from the retail again. Those powerful female leaders. You know, that world taught me so much about that role model element. So I've started using, I heard this on a podcast a few weeks ago, and I've started using it in a few of my training sessions. Personal and professional development is a lifelong journey. And that's kind of what I want to speak to my audience there, because that's sort of stop thinking about development as something we do and make it something we are, and part of us, because that for me then takes that um, fear, doubt away of when we don't know something, we don't feel we're good enough. Because if we're on that journey that we're always growing, we're always learning, we're always evolving, it gives us permission to not know it all and to not be sort of feeling fully confident in things. So yeah, using that with my clients on building that picture of growth and knowing that I'm not the finished article, so it's okay for them not to be. That's really powerful, and it does feel more natural to have that mindset, because I've worked with a couple of people that have been through redundancy, and it hits people differently at different times in their life. But that for me was a bit of a pivotal reflection when I started looking back on a lot of this.
I think for women, I'm just thinking about something you said there, and these recordings I've been doing for people in the directory. There's something about us not being confident to go out there unless we're the finished product.
Massive.
And it's you know, when I started this journey with the club and with the directory, and I started to meet therapists who actually so far have all been women, there was this fear of being seen and being visible. And so I really get what you're saying about, you know, I always say to people, vulnerability is your biggest power. You know, it will stop people dead in their tracks if you admit that you know, you're not the finished product, that you have issues, that you have weaknesses. What I see time and time again are these inspirational stories where women just say, do you know what, I'm a work in progress. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying, and I keep coming back to the table and regrouping, and trying a different way. And that is so impressive, isn't it? It's such a courageous act to say that out loud and to work with that.
And believe that ourselves, I think, is really key. To be
Yeah.
proud and own that. And not to worry too much around what we think others think, in that space is really powerful, because you're right, we need to just be more supportive of ourselves in that time, I think, when we're feeling that way.
I don't know if we're getting better or worse at it. I look at I look at my daughter who's sort of going through early work experiences, and you look at the sort of perceived confidence that young people seem to have, but underneath, the flaws and the need for support and coaching are massive, aren't they?
It kind of
In
makes
young people, I'm not sure we're improving really in the workplace to
I
give
just
people the right
wonder,
support.
what support should be there and could be there. And I wonder now how different it could have been, because there was, you look back, don't you, with rose tinted glasses on what we've done. And I think, how did I just used to rock up and deliver training? I'd never done any, before tech, it was just a flip chart and I just did it. And I'm like, how did I used to do that? Why am I so nervous these days in everything I do? And I guess it's age maybe supports us where we're in that youth and we're just like, let's just go for it potentially. But that there's a big gap in that kind of age bracket for coaching and mentoring massively.
And do you find that companies are provide it? I mean, I'm long out of the corporate world. You know, if people are struggling, is there the recognition that giving people mentoring support is
I think graduate wise,
Is
mentoring is a big
available.
thing. I think there is that world. I've worked with a few grads on mentoring. I've mentored people into organisations, to support them in terms of like, how do I get ready? What do I need to do and be
Yeah,
aware
yeah.
of? And that can come into confidence building as well. A lot of the time around network building, I think that's a key thing. And like when you're kind of young and youthful, like how do I know who I need in my corner or at my table to get
Mm.
myself? I think it does depend on the organisation for sure, but I think definitely the conversations are happening around coaching and mentoring being on the agenda in terms of the L&D world is definitely something that I've seen moving
Mm.
forwards.
Mm.
Definitely, when I was back in leadership, for those sort of 12 years, it was, I don't remember many conversations around coaching. I did a lot of mentoring.
No,
But,
no.
yeah, definitely. Um,
So, what do you think when you're working with somebody, what creates the biggest impact for them?
I
What are
think
those moments when you notice that shift and that you realize that people are going to move and
I think I'd probably say self-awareness is the big one because
yeah.
that's a lot of the work I do. However, it's transformational, but it's quite a vulnerable space. So it's being cautious with how we do it. And I don't often use it as a big marketing angle because it can be quite a scary place. And there is vulnerabilities in that space when we
Mm.
start
Mm.
holding up that
Mm.
mirror and, maybe allowing those thoughts or realizations to be presented to us that have either been buried or we've not considered before. So I'd approach it in a very safe and gentle way and allow that at their pace. So a lot of that self awareness is built throughout the relationship. And they might not notice it evolving until there'll be a bit of a light bulb realization somewhere down the line. So, that kind of baseline of values, strengths, and beliefs to really find out what's going on is quite key with a lot of the clients I work with. And then we can use that to then build on that, like we were saying, self-worth, confidence, so that
Mm.
they can start to
Mm.
see the impact that they can make with it. So yeah, to really get to the point though where they're doing that themselves is the tipping point, because I'm not coaching to be their savior or their anchor. They're not going to be having sex
Yeah.
with me forever. So it's got to come from them for it to have that meaning and make that lasting change for them. So yeah, I think leaning back into that previous question of like it's an ever evolving journey, because we do need to do the work to be self-aware, but then we are evolving, right? So it's coming back and just remembering that in that space. But yeah, it's a rare place for a lot of people, particularly in leadership. Self-awareness
Mm.
is not always
Mm.
the
Mm.
forefront for leaders, and that can be a lot of the kind of challenges that they face. Yeah, so being that good leader for ourselves is probably a key one before we can lead others in that leadership space. But self-awareness can be, such a massive help for so many.
And at what point in the process do you notice that people have shifted enough to be able to carry on their own? How do you see that unfolding as you take them through the process? Is there a
You
sort of
know,
moment when they regroup and yeah, they can take on board everything that they've absorbed and learned from the coaching and step back, or do they do it gently? Do they sort of
I think it's client dependent for sure, but I think there's definitely um, themes, depending on what they've found successful in the past,
yeah.
and what their background is. Because I've worked with clients that have gone, do you know what? We've done a couple of sessions and it's been really explorational. And we get to the point where we're like, okay, so the so what part, I know what I need to do. It's just I'm stuck with the motivation bit. So I guess it's when we dig into like, actually, we know where we're at sometimes, but what's the barrier? And that can
Mm,
be different per
mm,
person. Some people will be like, okay, now I get it. Right. I know it makes sense now. I can go and do. Whereas some people just get stuck in that mud of like, so what else might be going on? Do we need to dig a little bit more because something else is holding us
yeah,
back apart from
yeah,
what we know we need to now go do? Yeah, so it's an evolving process. It's per client. Some clients, we've got to sort of 6 as average, 4 to 6 sessions, throughout. But we'll get there, and then we'll go, there's more to do, actually. Let's, maybe we'll take a pause, or maybe we'll continue and just keep going until we feel, because things can happen, life can happen, job changes can happen, people are applying for jobs, your coaching relationship suddenly shifts to all that sort of world of like, how do I get ready for this interview? And so then let's come back to what we're actually going to work on. So yeah, it can
I used to have some interesting ones in my early career when I remember a spell of time I was working with addictions, and I used to get quite thrown by the fact that I would see people twice and then they'd just like disappear. And I had no measurements, no guide, where we were, had the process been successful. And you tend to self-doubt, don't you, as a coach in that moment? Did I facilitate in the right way? Did I have no feedback? So were the outcomes achieved? And I remember bumping into one guy many years after I'd worked with him, and sort of, the subject came up, and I said, I never heard from you. And he said, I just didn't need to come back. Wow. He said it was brilliant. And I thought, wow, all that time I, as a coach or a mentor for him going through his process in that sort of therapeutic setting, questions.
Yeah.
People react so differently, don't they, to these processes? That it's a really interesting one, and then you get the clients who pop up every 6 months and need to touch base and need to come back in. And
I have had that with a fair few clients where they've got to we've got one left, and that I think I might keep it in the bag, actually. Can I let you know? Because, I'm going to need something in about 3 months or so.
A detachment problem.
It's theirs, I think
interesting.
It's security, I guess, a little bit. But it's interesting, that approach, because how do we really dig into the impact we've had on people, and unless we get that feedback space, and it's always thinking of it from their angle is probably my key. So I like to close the session with something that they've learned about themselves that they can take away and go and do as well, so that you can sort of get a measure of, how's it landing? Like, are they feeling like this is beneficial? So yeah, it's definitely an unknown sometimes as to what's then going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and that sort of impacts on you and your process. And, for the next client along the way. So truth and authenticity, I know that's a big part of your style, and what the coaching method that you do. How do you support people to lead authentically?
Leading authentically is a key thing, and I think you mentioned it earlier, actually, the kind of vulnerability in leadership and empathy. We hear so much about that now, and how effective it can be, and it absolutely can. There's so much talk around it, books around it. The Brené Brown world now, we're all about that, leading from the heart, which is wonderful. But I really want us to get to that place where self-leadership is just as important in that space, because I genuinely do think if we've got that sussed, you can be so much more of an effective leader for others. Because you can really lead yourself well, so you know what you need, and okay, I've seen good managers, I've seen bad managers, I know, and interesting language there. Managers and leaders for me is quite a different thing, manager versus leader. We want to be in that kind of empowering leader space where we can. So doing that kind of self-awareness work that we've talked about, and continued learning and growth, then enables us to be in that curious mode rather than that tell manager role. So the role model work for me has helped with that massively, and that's really transformational. For I can work on it with the clients because I've lived it and understand it inside out from Alice, and from what it's helped me build my brand with. And I often use it as a kind of angle of, we've all got inspirations, we've all got leaders we love, or authors, musicians, whoever it might be that we look up to. And that can be really fun in that role model space, to have that inspire piece that we can do exercises around. Well, what is it about them that I admire? But then, okay, now how can I use that to grow the best version of me, and really make it about me, not me replicating and copying others.
Yeah.
So that's the key, I think. Do the work, sit in it and understand it, and try it out, but always leave it going, so what does that mean for me? How
Yeah.
does that help me achieve what I want to then achieve? It's easy to be in that tell mode in leadership, and sometimes it's needed in safety critical environments or, tasky environments.
Yeah.
It gets the job done quicker, but it keeps that leader in the power. So if you are, supporting a team or an individual to learn and create these opportunities for them to find their own way of doing things, that's when we empower them, and that's the intrinsic motivation that's going to keep them coming back to work for you or with you. And many years ago, I heard the term "great leaders take people with them," and I often use that in that kind of mindset of great leadership, because you're really inspiring and motivating and growing your people. You're not keeping them working for you, coming with you. And I love that term, because it really does, for me, that's what I see in a leader, when I think about what that looks like.
Yeah. Wow, fascinating. What a journey. And you're still growing and you're still learning.
Always.
You're not a finished product, which I think is brilliant. And thank you so much, Yvonne, for sharing your story with us today. You can find all the details about Yvonne and her business on the wellbeingdirectory.co.uk. Thank you again, and we'll be back again with another episode.
Thank you, Helen.